Hello and welcome to The Pulse, the show where we get you issues relating to you, me and the society at large. My name is Tina Jha. This week on the show, we talk about the problem of plastic pollution and ways to reuse and recycle plastic. All of us are aware that the world today is choking on plastic. In just the last 10 years, we have produced more plastic than in the whole of the previous century. Scientists have calculated the total amount of plastic ever made in the last 60 years or so and put the number at 8.3 billion tons, which is equivalent to the weight of 1 billion elephants. And since plastic takes at least 400 or 500 years to degrade, more than 70% of the total production of plastic items is now in our landfills, rivers, lakes, and finally the oceans. Studies estimate over 8 million tons of plastic is dumped into the ocean annually, causing unprecedented damage to the world's delicate ecosystems. But despite the disastrous consequences posed by this indestructible material, we are still producing more than 300 million tons of plastic every year, 50% of which is for single-use purposes, which means they are utilized only for a few moments. On World Environment Day last year, India pledged to phase out single-use plastics by the year 2022. And towards achieving the goal, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in his Independence Day address this year, underlined the importance of shunning single-use plastic. In fact, he's likely to launch the campaign against single-use plastic on 11 September. It's also reported that the central government may announce a complete ban on a number of single-use plastic items on 2nd October, the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. On this edition of The Pulse, we will analyze the magnitude of the plastic problem in India and possible solutions towards managing the tons of plastic waste that is being produced every single day. Joining me on the show today are Mr. Prashant Gargav, Member Secretary, Central Pollution Control Board. Next to him is Swati Singh Sambyal. She is Program Manager, Centre for Science and Environment. Mr. Ajay Garg, Secretary, Indian Pollution Control Association. Mr. Sachin Sharma, Founder Director at GEM Enviro Management Private Limited. Suriti, she's a citizen activist and an anti-plastic warrior. I welcome all of you on this edition of The Pulse. We're also being joined by P. Binisha from Bengaluru. She's Executive Director, International Institute of Waste Management. Ma'am, thank you for joining us on this edition of The Pulse. And besides, we also have a group of young students among members of the audience, and they will also put forth their views on the subject on today's program. Before we start our discussion today, let me play out this report for you that talks about the magnitude of the plastic problem worldwide. Plastic pollution has become a major worry for the world. It is estimated that countries across the world produce about 300 million tons of plastic waste every year, 50% of which is for single-use purposes, utilized for just a few moments. According to a study published in journal Science, since the early 1950s, more than 8.3 billion tons of plastic has been produced, of which 6.3 billion metric tons has become plastic waste. Only about 9% of it has been recycled. This means a vast majority of plastic is accumulating in landfills or the natural environment as litter. If present trends continue, by the year 2050, there will be 12 billion metric tons of plastic in the landfills. Reports suggest at least 8 million tons of plastic is dumped into the oceans every year, which is equivalent to dumping the contents of one garbage truck into the ocean every single minute. If no action is taken, this could increase to 2 trucks per minute by 2030 and 4 per minute by 2050. Scientists have also warned that there will be more waste plastic in the sea than fish by 2050. Like much of the world, India is struggling to dispose its growing quantities of plastic waste. According to an estimate by the Central Pollution Control Board, India generates close to 26,000 tons of plastic every day. About 94% of this comprises of thermoplastic, which is recyclable. The remaining belongs to thermoset and other categories of plastics, which are non-recyclable. Nearly 1/6 of the total plastic waste is generated by 60 major cities of the country, with Delhi, Chennai, Kolkata, Mumbai and Bengaluru, together generating more than 50% of the total contribution from these cities. Around 40% of plastic waste remains uncollected, causing choking of drainage and river systems, littering of the marine ecosystem, soil and water pollution, leading to adverse impact on human health and environment. To check the menace of uncollected plastic waste, India committed to eliminating at least single-use plastic by the year 2022. Although gaining control of plastic waste has now become a huge and challenging task worldwide, a comprehensive, holistic, global approach will certainly pave way to lessen the damage on our ecosystems. So let me begin today's discussion with Mr. Prashant Gargav. He's Member Secretary, Central Pollution Control Board. Sir, the government is likely to announce a complete ban on several single-use plastic items. How much of an impact do you see it making on the problem of plastic waste in India?
The problem, or the extent of problem, is huge. It's a multidimensional problem, and we have to tackle it in an entire integrated approach.
Certainly.
Single-use plastic ban will certainly have impact, great impact. At the same time, we also need to work on different areas involving various stakeholders. To begin with, there has to be a regulatory framework, which we have in terms of plastic waste management rules and also solid waste management rules that were brought in 2016. That clearly lays down the roles and responsibilities of each and every stakeholder, be it urban local bodies, the pollution control boards, the producers, their responsibilities to collect it back, the infrastructure that needs to be created. So the whole regulatory framework is in place. Now what's important is to ensure that the rules are implemented in totality. That is what, at Central Pollution Control Board, at the government level, we are trying to do. Also trying to facilitate that every stakeholder is able to contribute. Now coming to ban of single-use plastic, now this is a huge problem. You see there are large number of plastic items which are used on day-to-day basis.
Yes.
Cutleries, for example, straws, plastic cups, these are just thrown away. And then they don't find any recycling potential. They end up in the garbage, and with the lack of facilities as of now for segregation at source, of course, a lot of activities are happening on those accounts. But then they end up in the municipal solid waste, gets burnt. Delhi faces a lot of air pollution problems, especially in the winter. And then plastic waste burning is a major factor in deteriorating the air quality. Now, government initiative for banning, what is important is that when we look at the items, the so-called single-use plastic items, now what's important is its impact, in terms of impact, environment, then whether there are alternatives available or not, its impact in terms of applicability, the quantity in which they are being used, alternatives whether they are available or not. So there has to be a matrix worked out to prioritize as to what kind of single-use plastic.
Certainly, and we have to work towards that.
We could probably, phase out, very quickly, and without affecting the normal, working.
That's right, because we have to provide citizens the alternative of single-use plastic.
For example, for cutlery, I'm told that there are now, Bartan banks.
Okay.
And then many cities they have started this. Even in fact, in Ghaziabad there is a Bartan bank.
And then now the challenge is to spread awareness.
Now the challenge is to spread the awareness, and then all the small parties and these Bartan banks people are taking from there and use these utensils.
Certainly.
For
so
parties.
what the government is doing is of course a welcome step, but we need to be better prepared. Swati, 300 million tons of plastic being produced every single year, and of which 50% is single-use plastic. Of course, as I spoke earlier as well, the ban is a welcome move. But how much of an impact does single-use plastic have on the environment, on our delicate ecosystems, and much of which have already seen extensive damage over the years?
Well, if you look at single-use plastics, they majorly constitute about 43% of the plastic waste, which includes both single-use as well as packaging waste. And as you said, that most of it is one-time use, and you just use it and you just dump it. So once it's dumped, it would either go to a landfill site, or it will either clog the drain, or from there to the river, to the sea. So you can look at mass level of contamination, not just to soil, but to water bodies, as well as affecting the aquatic and marine ecosystem also.
Yes.
And in some ways, there are a lot of studies that estimate now that plastic is there in a salt, it's there in a poop, it's there in water bottles, it's there in what not. So the huge issue of infiltration of plastic into almost everything that we consume has become a major issue, because most of single-use plastics, they're not financially viable to, kind of recycle them. And thus they keep on contaminating the environment as they are introduced into the environment. So that's the major issue. And of course, what the government has done is very much welcoming. Bans are important, they should happen, but it's one part of the solution, and
certainly
we have to look into the bigger picture as a whole.
P. Binisha, let me get you in here. Certainly, see, over the last 60 years or so, what we have produced is very much there on the planet. What we are producing every day will not go anywhere in the next 400 to 500 years. But what we can do is, of course, manage the plastic in a better way. So, at your organization, what are the best possible ways that you are engaging in to recycle, reuse this huge amount of plastic waste that we are generating?
In Bangalore, we tried out certain pilot projects, especially in mass events, because these are the areas where we have been using a lot of single-use plastics. And one such mass event, which really has a lot of problems, is a cricket match. And we, during the IPL, that's which just got over recently, we did this activity in Chinnaswamy Stadium in Bangalore. And all of you know that Chinnaswamy Stadium is the first eco stadium in the world, the cricket stadium in the world. So for all the 7 matches which took place here, we tried to implement measures to phase out single-use plastics. And it was a great success, because we could try out several alternatives to single-use plastics. We could phase out several plastics. We also came out with some innovative measures, which in fact is in line with the plastic, especially introducing extended producer responsibility. And this was with the vendors here, and it was quite successful. What we realized is we did an audit of waste, and about 68 to 75% of plastics and material which is used in a cricket match is single-use plastics.
Okay.
And this can easily be phased out. And unless we do certain measures of segregation, it becomes very difficult for it to be recycled. And several of these single-use plastics cannot be recycled. That is something which we need to be aware. So it's a really good step which the government has taken to ban single-use plastics.
Mr. Garg, what is the IPCA doing to manage the huge amount of plastic waste?
अगर मैं स्टार्ट करना चाहूँगा, मैं थोड़ा सा इस पीछे लेके जाना चाहूँगा आपको कि किसी भी चीज़ के पीछे कुछ कारण होता है, तो पीछे हमें उसका जानना पड़ेगा कि ऐसा क्यों है. तो जितना भी, अगर जैसे बताया, लैंड हमारी ख़राब हो रही है, ओशन हमारे ख़राब हो रहे हैं प्लास्टिक की वजह से, पर उसके पीछे रीज़न क्या है? जितना भी प्लास्टिक है वो सही तरीके से कलेक्ट नहीं हो पा रहा है, या लोगों को जो हमारा बिहेवियर चेंज है वो ऐसा हो गया है कि हमें इम्पैक्ट ही नहीं पड़ रहा है कि अगर हमने रोड साइड पे फेंका है तो उसका क्या इम्पैक्ट वापस हमारे ऊपर आ रहा है. तो IPCA बहुत सारी चीज़ें इसके ऊपर कर रहा है। अभी जैसा कि मैम ने बताया कि EPR एक्सटेंडेड प्रोड्यूसर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, उसमें बहुत सारी इंडस्ट्री आई हैं, डाबर है, नेस्ले है, DS है, बहुत सारी कंपनियों ने इसमें आगे आई हैं और इम्पैक्ट डाला है कि कितना प्लास्टिक, अगर IPCA ने अभी EPR के तहत में पीछे लास्ट ईयर में 20,000 मेट्रिक टन प्लास्टिक कलेक्ट किया है और को प्रोसेस और रिसाइकलिंग को भेजा है। इसी के तहत IPCA ने एक प्रोजेक्ट अभी नया शुरू किया है, माई 10 kg प्लास्टिक। तो अगर एक सर्वे के अकॉर्डिंग है कि एक साल में पर पर्सन जो है 10 kg प्लास्टिक जनरेट करता है।
अच्छा।
तो IPCA ने लोगों तक, स्कूल के बच्चों तक ये मुहिम चलाने की कोशिश की है कि अगर इंडिविजुअल एक साल के अंदर कोई भी पर्सन 10 kg प्लास्टिक कलेक्ट करता है तो IPCA उसको उस जगह से कलेक्ट कर सकती है और सही जगह पर रिसाइकलिंग के लिए या को प्रोसेसिंग के लिए उसको भेज सकती है। जब तक हमारे अंदर ये बिहेवियर चेंज नहीं आएगा तो इसको करना बहुत मुश्किल है। बैन करना बहुत आसान है, किसी भी चीज़ को बैन करना बहुत आसान है, पर उसके ऑल्टरनेटिव होने चाहिए। पर ऑल्टरनेट से अगर आज के टाइम में हमारे पास ऑल्टरनेट नहीं है तो मुझे लगता है कि उससे पहले उसका कलेक्शन मैकेनिज्म कैसा है वो बेहतर हो। जो नीचे रैक पिकर कम्युनिटी है, वेस्ट कलेक्टर जो हैं, वो इसमें बहुत अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं, उनको कैसे स्ट्रेंथन किया जाए इसके अंदर लाके कि ताकि वो वेस्ट मटेरियल सही जगह पर जा सके। तो पहले
सेग्रीगेशन का अवेयरनेस लोगों में होना बहुत जरूरी है।
तो RWAs के अंदर, स्कूल्स के अंदर सेग्रीगेशन के बारे में लोगों को अवेयर करना, जब तक लोग अवेयर ही नहीं होंगे, लोगों को पता ही नहीं होगा कि हमें करना क्या है और उस करने के बाद वो मटेरियल जा कहाँ रहा है। तो लोग अवेयर होते हैं, लोगों को एक्साइटमेंट होता है कि ये मटेरियल से ये प्रोडक्ट बन सकता है, तो लोग ज़्यादा इस चीज़ के लिए आगे आते हैं।
स्वच्छता अभियान आने से ये अवेयरनेस लोगों में आई कि साफ सफाई रखनी चाहिए, लेकिन अब आपको लगता है कि ऐसे स्ट्रिंजेंट रूल्स लाने चाहिए कि आप वेस्ट सेग्रीगेट नहीं करेंगे तो हम आपका कूड़ा नहीं उठाएंगे।
Exactly.
ठीक है। देखिए, a lot many of us will talk about reusing and recycling plastic, but what Mr. Sachin Sharma has been doing is he's actually actively involved in segregating, recycling plastic. Mr. Sharma, share with us your story as to how you came into this sector, how has the journey been over the years, and what are the kind of challenges that you have faced towards this huge cause?
Yeah, we started this organization in 2013. And we started with the collection of the pre-consumer waste from the plants of beverage companies like Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and a few more. And later on, we realized that the bigger problem is with the post-consumer waste. So, which is basically, you know, the going to the consumers and consumers are throwing the waste. So, the bigger problem is the collection of this. So, we started setting up the collection centers for the same. We involved the rack picker community into the same. And as of now, we have got more than 50 collection centers throughout the country. And we work with more than about say 15,000 rack pickers. And in addition to this, we also had installed the reverse vending machines, more than say 50 reverse vending machines at different places in Delhi, NCR, Gurgaon, as well as in Maharashtra. And so these reverse vending machines were basically targeted towards the collection, a direct collection from the consumers, where the consumers can deposit a bottle and they can get some kind of reward out of this. So this is a kind of a technology-driven approach for the collection part. And we are also working with the various recyclers. One of the recycler, our group company, Ganesha Ecosphere, they recycle about say more than 1 lakh metric ton of PET every year. So our belief is that more and more plastic should be made recyclable, so that the problem of the plastic should be, can be solved to a very high extent. Now, as per the CBCB study or as per the CBCB data, I would say about say 94% of the plastics in India is recyclable.
Yes.
So that's a high quantity. But if you see the data in terms of the actual what is being recycled, only if you say in case of only PET, 80% is recycled, but the other plastic like HDLD, they are recycled to a smaller extent. So as Ajay has also pointed out that the collection is a major challenge.
Yes.
And if we do collection in a better systematic way, so the percentage of recycling will increase and this problem of plastic will definitely come down.
Suriti, because what Mr. Sharma is doing is commendable, and in that context, what you are doing as an individual is also making a huge difference in society. Share with us your story on how you became an anti-plastic warrior. Considering our dependency on plastic items, we're all surrounded in our daily lives, plastic items are everywhere around us. So how big a challenge was it for you to reduce your dependency on these items?
So I started small. I didn't have huge ambitions in the beginning. I just didn't want to consume any plastic on a personal basis. So I just questioned myself again and again why I need an item, what is its requirement, and how long will it last? Will it serve me for 10 years? And if all the answers were yes, only then I bought it. So it was a lot of thinking on my part. But as Sir said, he said 95% of India's plastic waste is recyclable. I feel that recycling is only a very small part of the solution, because recycling also consumes a lot of energy. In fact, just for 5 minutes, we need a plastic bag. Why should we waste tons of energy just to recycle that plastic bag? We shouldn't buy it in the first instance.
Yes.
So I think there is a behavioral change required. And I feel that the behavior change in India is also because we are apathetic to the people in the lower rung. We are apathetic to the rag pickers. They put their hands inside the waste every day. They sometimes get cut by blades and pins, but we don't care. It's also because it's a caste issue and it's a class issue. So we need to handle it from all sides.
It's a larger societal behavioral change that we are all expecting. Let me now bring in some young voices in the audience as well. So what Suriti is doing is an inspiration for all of us. As youngsters, what we've been discussing here is that plastic problem is going to is currently posing a huge problem for us, and in the future certainly our ecosystems will certainly be damaged to a large extent. So as youngsters, what do you think will make a difference? How should we change our behavior towards using plastic? What Suriti is doing in line with that. Maybe later on in the program I'll ask Suriti to share some tips with us, but as youngsters, what will you do to reduce your consumption of plastic?
Hello everyone, I am Namit Gupta. I am a journalism student from DCAC. Certainly she is an inspiration for me as well. Like right now all of us sitting over here, we are getting inspired. Similarly, the others people watching this show will get inspired. That
yes,
is also,
and she's been running a successful campaign. So
exactly,
there are people like you who are supporting her in the cause and taking it forward.
So that is a kind of hope that we all will get from this. But also like one question comes to my mind. It is like a long question. I would like to ask Mr. Bhargav about it. That banning is certainly one thing very important. But again, what government is doing to, encourage the scientific experiment in India particularly, so that we can find alternatives to plastic?
Yeah, very valid question. In fact, I thought, I would give, slightly detailed account of, what all is happening in this front. First of all, when I started saying that there has to be a regulatory framework and then an atmosphere to facilitate, to promote that, implementation of rules and regulations actually take place on ground. Banning, of course, is not a solution unless until you have a better viable alternative available. Looking into the greater impact, the threat, that, such plastics pose on each one of, our lives, it's important that we look for alternates. Now, not only that, banning, but recycle, reuse. There are recycling facilities like, what he says are set up. Large amount of plastic, is diverted to energy recovery processes. In cement plants, large amount of solid waste, including plastic, that is used to generate energy. So it also becomes a resource for energy. Then we are also looking at compostable plastics. Carry bags in Delhi NCR, some of you must have seen now. These are available, these are being used now. So around 47,000 tons of compostable plastic carry bags are now being produced. So we have issued licenses to around 70 such facilities. So this becomes an alternate to your carry bags. It gets biodegraded in the atmosphere. So there are scientific, technical, research happening. One example, this compostable bags, then energy efficiency, using plastic, how do you, also helps in minimizing your energy dependency on fossil fuels. So a lot of activities are happening on in those areas.
Any more questions from the audience?
Hi, I'm Shrishti from Delhi College of Arts and Commerce. Actually, according to me, the climate change is something that we do not encounter in everyday life, right? And so we tend to forget the repercussions of it. So having panel discussions is one thing. What else? What should people do to be reminded of it again and again? Right? Because then we'll forget it. We'll have panel discussion here, we'll forget it after some time. What else should we do?
See, the problem is climate change is certainly affecting large parts of the globe, our country as well. We've seen extreme climate events across the country, but unless it impacts us directly, we are not concerned. Swati, would you like to answer that question?
I think Thanks for the wonderful question. Social consciousness is very much important, and in our society, in some extent, especially concerning issues on waste, the social engineering component is not looked at. You can set up infrastructure, we can have recycling facilities, we can even put bans, but unless and until people are not engineered to do something right, it won't happen on the ground. So I feel we all must invest our time. I mean, we as experts, people like her who are working on the ground, students like you, to kind of advocate, become messengers for change on the ground, collaborate with ULBs, because especially with issues concerning plastics, presently our municipal system, our waste management system on the ground is weak. Yes, we've had a huge campaign, Swachh Bharat Mission has brought a huge paradigm shift on the ground, but still our segregation percentages is very low. For even recycling units to run properly, for even informal sector to work properly so that they don't get hurt, they get their due incentives, it's important that segregation happens on the ground rightly. But just look at all our dustbins to start with. How many of us segregate properly to start with? So all of it has to start from the consumer. Yes, extended producer responsibility is important, but consumer responsibility, I think, is foremost. So I think we all must become messengers for change and contribute to it. Work with municipalities, work with CPCB, work with local NGOs, civic organizations, and yes, slowly and slowly, change will happen, and it has happened on the ground.
Mr. Gargar, Swati mentioned extended producer responsibility. Yes. So before we move ahead in the program, for the benefit of our audience and the viewers, explain to us what is extended producer responsibility that the producers are supposed to abide by, and how does CPCB ensure that companies are fulfilling their EPR obligation?
Extended producer responsibility, sort of mandate given to the producer or the importer or the bulk, users, that they must buy back or get the equal amount of the material that they are putting into the market, back from the market.
Okay.
So they need to collect it back. That's important. And they have to obtain registration from the state pollution control boards. And if they are operating in more than 2 states, then they need to take certificate from Central Pollution Control Board. They have to very clearly specify as to what is their overall plan, the entire collection mechanism, what is their understanding with the urban local bodies. So they will have to come out with a complete plan along with the urban local bodies.
Okay.
The entire channel, it could be their own channel, or they could engage somebody to get these waste collected back. That's what is the producer's responsibility.
Okay. And how are you ensuring that these companies are abiding by this obligation?
No, they have to file the returns as to how much quantity they sold in a particular year and how much quantity has been collected back.
Okay.
So that is how it is being monitored.
Ajay Garg, what is the role of the IPCA in this context in ensure towards EPR that we are talking about?
EPR में IPCA जो है एज ए वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट एजेंसी काम कर रही है। अभी जैसे मैंने शुरू में बताया कि IPCA पिछले 18 सालों से वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट के ऊपर काम कर रही है, जिसमें अवेयरनेस के ऊपर लोगों को स्कूल में बच्चों के साथ अवेयरनेस का काम कर रही है। और रैक पिकर ग्रुप का एक नेटवर्क क्रिएट किया है IPCA ने। और जब ये रूल आया है, रूल 2060 PWM का, उसके अंतर्गत में जब EPR का आया तो IPCA अभी 24 स्टेट्स के अंदर काम कर रहा है, जहाँ पर जो रैक पिकर कम्युनिटी है, एग्रीगेटर है, उन लोगों को अवेयर करते हैं कि ये मटेरियल सेग्रीगेट कीजिए, क्योंकि क्वांटिटी में मटेरियल उन्हीं लोगों से मिल सकता है क्योंकि वो लोग वेस्ट कलेक्शन के अंदर हैं। तो उन लोगों को अवेयर किया जा सकता है कि ये मटेरियल अपने वेस्ट में से अलग कीजिए, और IPCA आपसे ये मटेरियल परचेज करेगा, आपको इंसेंटिवाइज करेगा। और वो जब उन लोगों से मटेरियल कलेक्ट किया जाता है, हमारे कुछ ड्राई वेस्ट कलेक्शन सेंटर है जहाँ पर वो मटेरियल आता है, उनको बेल किया जाता है और फिर वो राइट जगह पर चैनलाइज किया जाता है। जो मटेरियल को प्रोसेस के लिए जाना है वो को प्रोसेस के लिए जाएगा, जो रिसाइकलिंग के लिए जाना है रिसाइकलिंग के लिए जाएगा। जैसा कि सचिन ने बताया कि जो पैट बॉटल है, पैट बॉटल ऑलरेडी एक चैनल है, पहले से रिसाइकिल हो रहा है। पर अगर हम बात करें MLP की, मल्टी लेयर पैकेजिंग की, जिसके अंदर कुरकुरे, लेस, बिस्किट पैकेज, जो ये वाला पैकेजिंग होता है, ये अब से पहले रिसाइकिल या को प्रोसेस नहीं हो रहा था। पर जब से EPR आया है और जिसके अंदर जो इंडस्ट्री ने आगे आई है इसमें, तो IPCA ने उन रैक पिकर कम्युनिटी को बताया कि ये मटेरियल भी अब रिसाइकिल हो सकता है। उस कैटेगरी को, उस रैक पिकर कम्युनिटी को अगर आप किसी भी चीज़ के लिए इंसेंटिवाइज करते हैं तो वो लोग आपके लिए वो मटेरियल सेग्रीगेट करते हैं।
ठीक है।
और वो मटेरियल जब सेग्रीगेट होकर आपके पास आता है तो वो वेस्ट टू एनर्जी प्लांट, सीमेंट किल इंडस्ट्री, पैरालिसिस, रोड कंस्ट्रक्शन, इन सब जगह पर वो मटेरियल को भेजा जाता है ताकि वो मटेरियल इधर उधर ना जाए और राइट चैनल में वो जाए। तो आईपीसी अभी 24 स्टेट्स में इस मटेरियल को कलेक्ट कर रही है और डिफरेंट को प्रोसेसर को भेज रही है।
ठीक है। Swati, there is a concern that with the advent of producer responsibility organizations last year, the plastic producers, importers and brand owners have outsourced their EPR targets. So has it led to any kind of problem?
Well, EPR का भी अगर मैं बात करूँ तो बहुत अच्छे से लागू नहीं हो पाया है. We need to have clear collection targets for companies, and as you said, most of the times it's outsourced to PRO agencies. And the basic challenge on the ground is that of collection, or the basic challenge on the ground is that you don't really get plastic which is not contaminated. Most of the times the plastic is contaminated. So even with PRO agencies that are responsible for meeting targets on behalf of companies, the kind of contaminated plastic and the scale of which that they get is huge. So most of the times a lot of it also goes for disposal as well, which is a huge challenge. So I think for extended producer responsibility, consumer awareness again plays an important role. There needs to be deposit refund schemes for certain products. I'll just give an example of milk sachets. Now this is something that milk is an essential item. You all go to booths, you all buy milk. Why can't you just probably take your cans or dabbas to get milk? I mean, a lot of booths have that option. Secondly, what if that sachet has a price? If it has a price, a consumer will ensure that it goes back to the milk booth, 15 paise or 50 paise or whatever is the model that works out. So I think putting price to packaging items would play an important role in ensuring that this gets back to the collection center and from then channelized to a recycler or for co-processing. So I think that will play an important role, because if you put a price to it, a consumer will think 1,000 times, this packet has value. I'll not put it in the bin. I'll just store it, and probably in a week's time, I'll give it back to the collection center from where it will be taken for its due course. So I think that will play a very important role.
Certainly. P. Binisha, Swati has pointed out several problems related to EPR targets. What do you think is the best possible approach? What kind of approach is needed to solve these problems?
Yeah, more than EPR, what I would like to bring to the notice of everybody is that we need to look at hierarchy of waste management. Because most of our problem is arising because we are not thinking of reducing the plastics first. Because a lot of it is convenience which is leading to waste. So if we can reduce plastics, which is possible to a large extent, and instead of giving too much emphasis on finding alternatives, because for example, with just reducing the paper cups for drinking water, again, I use the example of the stadium. We could reduce 20% of waste generation itself. So, and then comes the question of EPR. Here, we were able to do this, show that EPR is possible because we asked the vendor to collect the waste generated. So, thereby, we get segregated waste. And once you get segregated waste, it can be easily recycled. Because the challenge is collection of segregated waste so that it does not get contaminated with other waste. And if you give the target to the vendors right in the beginning, if they take the responsibility of collection, then it can be recycled well. Okay. And this, again, we showed it in the stadium because both the raw pressing and also PET collected back all the PET bottles, and then using the circular economy, they converted it to t-shirts and it was brought back to the stadium. So these kind of examples can be easily practiced at institutions, even in corporates. We can also use this in schools, colleges. So I think this is one way of encouraging EPR, and this is also one way where we don't have to heavily depend on the PRO mechanism because there are certain reservations because we don't have proper accountability to collect the numbers because we do have a problem with numbers because we really don't know how much is being generated, how much of it is going to what kind of people, because a lot of recycling happens in the informal sector.
Sachin Sharma, what Binisha pointed out is exactly what you are doing at your startup at GEM, making t-shirts, recycling it into different kinds of commodities.
Yeah, so this, if you see, mainly it's a PET, which is recycled to a larger extent. And I said earlier also, it's about say 80% recycled. So this PET is mainly this mineral water bottles or the soft drink bottles. And so the process is that there is a collection of PET happens through there is a well-established, already there is a chain there. And then it goes to our collection center where it is segregated. And even the, for example, like say green color bottles are, segregated differently. Then the transparent bottles are segregated differently. And then once segregation is done, it is basically there's a process of baling, which is where we compress this material to a larger extent so that it is easier to transport or it's economical to transport, I would say. And then it goes to our recycling plant, and there is a process of extrusion where it is melted at a high temperature and then it is solidified, and then we get the fiber out of this. And this fiber is called as a recycled polyester staple fiber. And with this fiber, we can make like different applications, like for example, say t-shirts, the laptop bags, the caps. So all kind of textile applications, can be made because of this. And so this recycled fiber is in terms of the properties is almost the same as the normal polyester fiber. So you won't notice, anything different in case of the recycled fiber as compared to the normal fiber. Yeah.
Okay. So coming back to the audience, what we are talking about is what we must do, what are the possible solutions, the alternatives. As youngsters, are we putting it into practice is the larger question.
Hi, this is Khushi from Delhi College of Arts and Commerce. So as far as the solutions are concerned, I saw this practice in Rajasthan where they use hand-stitched cloth bags, and thus encouraging the handicraft industry, cottage industries, and also reducing the plastic waste. So my question is to you, Prashant sir, that shouldn't be such a practice followed on a national level?
Yes, it should certainly be, but then, it has to become a mass movement. As a government agency, you can't, ask somebody, you can ban, either manufacturing of plastic bags, you can make it, economically not viable by heavy taxation, but you can't force an individual not to use a particular product. So what you're saying is absolutely right. The first point is that how do we, try to minimize the consumption itself. And there are alternatives available. These are available since ages. As a matter of fact, we had been using this, in earlier days. So it's primarily convenience, and then
perhaps the government needs to tell them where do you get it from.
Where do you
because unless you provide them the alternative, lead them to the alternative place, they wouldn't put it into practice. You want to say something?
I would just want to add to what Prashantji said. One thing on the ground presently with the issue of alternatives is that they're not viable for all income groups. Probably you and me can buy cloth bags, but everyone cannot, or everyone cannot afford to buy all the alternatives that are available. So I think, and there's also a concern of once you shut down plastic industries, what will happen to the informal market? So one solution could be to push for alternative industry. If you're saying ban plastic bags or ban single-use plastic products, but also increase alternative industry, provide these people who lose their job in plastic industry, shift them to the alternative industry. This will also provide solution to the demand supply issue right now that is there, because for 100 rupees, I think you can buy about 300 plastic bags, but for 100 rupees, you can't buy more than 4 to 5 cloth bags. So we really need to equalize on the pricing, and that will only happen, as you said rightly, when the alternative industry would be pushed. And a lot of people who lose their jobs because they were working on plastic industry, they'll be shifted to the alternative.
Suriti, share with us how your experience has been, because you have completely reduced dependency on plastic. So what is it that you have inculcated as a habit in yourself? Where do you get these cloth bags from?
Yeah, so the first thing I feel is that the carbon footprint of a new cloth bag is much higher than a plastic bag. So all of us buying new cloth bags would not be good for the environment. So you should use what you already have. I'm sure all of us have old Purana thelas or old plastic bags would do fine. So we need to see what we already have, because recycling also, I feel, maybe I'm too idealistic, but I feel it's like a band-aid solution. Even recycled t-shirts made out of recycled fabric, plastic fabric, they release microplastics which enter the ocean and then enter our food chain. So we're eating salt which has plastic sprinkled all over it.
So as a campaigner over quite some time now, how are you promoting these alternatives among people and among those who are supporting your cause?
So what I did myself was that I fished for old clothes and then took them to a darzi and got old cloth bags made. So that was my institution.
And how are you spreading awareness among people?
I usually use the internet because that is the medium all of us use these days. So I use social media, Facebook and Instagram, and just share my journey, what I'm doing, and I get comments from people who are interested.
ओके मिस्टर गर्ग, क्योंकि हम ऑल्टरनेटिव्स की बात कर रहे हैं, दो ऑल्टरनेटिव्स हैं कंपोस्टेबल बायोडिग्रेडेबल प्लास्टिक्स, बट क्या ये वायबल हैं कंसिडरिंग लिमिटेशंस जो हैं इनकी स्केल और कॉस्ट को लेकर? तो अब और क्या सॉल्यूशंस की ज़रूरत है हमें आने वाले टाइम में?
लिमिटेशंस तो हैं इनकी, क्योंकि बायोडिग्रेडेबल बैग है और फिर अगर बायोडिग्रेडेबल बैग होता है और नॉर्मल एक बैग होता है आपके पास, तो अगर आप उसको कलेक्ट करते हैं और फिर रिसाइकलिंग के लिए भेजते हैं तो उसमें भी इशू आएगा, क्योंकि हर मशीनरी अलग तरीके से बनी होती है कि इस मटेरियल को वो कैटेगराइज करके अलग रिसाइकिल करेगी। इसी तरीके से अगर जो रैक पिकर कम्युनिटी है जो उस वेस्ट को दोबारा से उठाएगा तो उसे नहीं पता है ये बायोडिग्रेडेबल है या रिसाइकलेबल है, तो अगेन एक दूसरा इशू आता है। तो अगर मुझे लगता है जो इनका एक सॉल्यूशन है, अगर हम उस चीज़ों को किसी तरीके से रीयूज़ कर सकते हैं, अगर उस पर हम आते हैं तो मुझे लगता है बेहतर ऑप्शन है। एक मुझे जो उन्होंने शुरू में क्वेश्चन पूछा था वो बड़ा अच्छा था। इतने टाइम से हम स्कूल कॉलेजेस में अवेयर कर रहे हैं, तो जनरली एक लेक्चर होता है, उसके बाद वो वहाँ तक सबको बहुत अच्छा लगता है, और उसके बाद जब उस रूम से बाहर निकलते हैं तो सब वो भूल जाते हैं। तो वो डिपेंड हम पे करता है, हमें अपना बिहेवियर चेंज करना है कि किस तरीके से वो बात हम आगे तक रखें, अपने फ्रेंड्स तक ले जाएं, अपने दोस्तों तक ले जाएं, चाहे वो सोशल मीडिया हो सकता है या वो 1-to-1 इंटरेक्शन हो सकता है, किसी तरह भी हो सकता है। और जहाँ तक आपने बात करी और ऑल्टरनेट नहीं है अभी उतने बेहतर जितने होने चाहिए। कुछ चीज़ों में किया जा सकता है। जगह अगर कटली की बात करें तो जैसे पहले पत्तल की प्लेट यूज़ की जाती थी और वो आगे दोबारा से यूज़ बहुत जगह हो रही है। साउथ की तरफ जाएँ तो लोग उसी प्लेट का इस्तेमाल करते हैं। तो वो कुछ चीज़ें हैं जिस पे हम काम कर सकते हैं। पर अगर बॉटल की बात करें तो प्लास्टिक बॉटल की जगह हम स्टील का बॉटल यूज़ कर सकते हैं जो बार बार यूज़ हो सकता है दोबारा से। स्कूल में अगर बच्चे टिफ़िन ला रहे हैं तो प्लास्टिक के टिफ़िन की जगह हम लोग बच्चे स्टील की डिब्बी, पहले हम बचपन में स्टील की डिब्बी लिया करते थे।
फिर वो कॉस्ट फैक्टर आ जाता है। नॉट एवरीवन कैन अगेन अफोर्ड इट। प्लास्टिक इज मच चीपर देन ऑल ऑफ दिस दैट वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट, से अ ग्लास बॉटल, अ स्टील बॉटल। तो जो अफोर्ड नहीं कर सकते उनके लिए हम क्या सोल्यूशन दे रहे हैं?
नहीं, जो अफोर्ड नहीं कर सकते इसीलिए बताया कि हमें उसका कलेक्शन में, इसीलिए किसी भी चीज़ को एकदम से तो फेस आउट नहीं किया जा सकता है। उसको यूज़ करके उसका कलेक्शन मैकेनिज्म कितना बेहतर बना पाए, और वो किया जा सकता है। शुरू में ही बात शुरू हुई जब ये प्रोग्राम शुरू हुआ कि ऑल्टरनेट जब तक नहीं होगा आप किसी चीज़ को फेस आउट कैसे कर सकते हैं।
कंसीडरिंग हमारी डिपेंडेंसी उस पर इतनी ज़्यादा है कि फेस आउट करना इमीडिएटली पॉसिबल भी नहीं है। मिस्टर शर्मा,
I have a point here that if we increase, what we have seen is in case of the packaging waste or the plastic waste where the thickness is higher, so these packets basically they are easily picked up, and the waste pickers also have incentive to pick up, and the recyclers are also basically able to recycle them. Now if you see the even the carry bags which are like more than say 100 microns or above, so they are easily picked up by the rack pickers, as well as they have the value also. Now I will also give you an example of a fertilizer bag. Now fertilizer bag is 100% reused. If you go to some rural area or a semi-urban area, you will find this kind of a bag is reused by all the farmers in various applications. For example, they can use as a mat, or they can use as a curtain, or they can use as a some kind of cover for covering their cattle or their different products. So the point here is that if the packaging is bigger in size or it is thicker in size, then definitely it is easily picked up, and the environment degradation in that case will be somewhat lesser as compared to the thin size.
Okay.
Uday Singh from Indian Institute of Mass Communication, and plastic is a huge problem, that's all we know. And my question leads in your warehouse, Mr. Prashant. I wanted to know that what does the government think about 3D printing? Can it be another alternative to the traditional recycling process? Because 3D printing has a lot of opportunities in front.
Okay, one more question, then I come back for the answer.
Hello everyone, my name is Amisha. I'm from Delhi College of Arts and Commerce. So we discussed upon putting a ban onto plastic, but what about the plastic which is already there in the country? I mean, as ma'am said, we cannot recycle it. I mean, we can, but again, it takes tons of energy. So do we have any other alternative left for the plastic which is already existing?
I'm Ravi Narayan from IIMC. I'm totally agree with Suriti ma'am. As she said, for 5 minutes, why should we use plastic bags and all? In Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, they are using banana leaves to wrap dry groceries and vegetables. As we are the largest producer of banana, don't you think so? And this can be a potential and alternative to these plastic bags, and we should streamline this idea to get rid of plastics.
Okay, let me go one by one. Mr. Prashant, first to you.
Yeah, let me. There are two questions. One, that girl was talking about alternatives available, and then why we should not use these alternatives. What is happening to the plastic which is already there? See, plastic per se is not bad. You can't remove the plastic from your life. Let's be practical on that. So what's important is that while you try to minimize its consumption, look for alternatives, which are more eco-friendly. At the same time, the collection and then resource recovery out of it, recycling, that's important. That's the key. Therefore EPR, therefore setting up more recycling facilities, therefore sending this collected plastic to cement plants. So these technology-based solutions, looking for compostable or other material, that can probably substitute. So we'll have to work on, entire, chain of the plastic use and its disposal. That's very important. 3D printing, of course, I haven't, thought much about it, but yes, it can be a solution.
Swati, what do you think about 3D printing?
Well, it definitely can be explored. I don't think so. It's happening in the country at a very large scale presently. But yes, as an option, I mean, when we are looking at everything that could be possible, definitely can be looked into. On the question on banana leaf, I think, yes, it's important to explore local solutions as well, but you can't even put it at a national level. So probably in an area where banana plantations are there, probably South India or other parts of the country, or maybe any other plantation which could serve as plates or cutlery. Yes, I mean, such options could definitely be explored. And I think one very important thing that's coming out is that minimization and putting it down to an individual level and asking the right questions to yourself would really help in reduction. Rather than asking an industry to do it or a recycler to do it, ask yourself as an individual, well, I'm buying this, I'm using it, is it the right thing to do, or will it help the environment or me? So posing the right questions is also equally important.
Mr. Sharma, I have a question for you. When we talk about managing plastic waste, one huge concern raised by environmentalists is the import of tons of plastic waste from several other countries. In fact, a recent report in the Economic Times last month claimed that more than 25 countries dumped about 121,000 metric ton of plastic waste in India. Of course, this is hampering our initiatives to reduce plastic pollution. My question is, why are we importing plastic waste when we are generating ourselves, a significant amount of plastic waste that we want to get rid of?
Yeah, I would say, in this case, the plastic which is imported is 100% recyclable.
Okay.
And it's imported by only the recycling industries. So, for example, in case of the PET industry in India, the PET industry, they are importing the plastic flakes. So these plastic flakes are they are then converted to form the fiber out of this. So these are like 100% recyclable material, and therefore they are imported. Yeah.
To add to this, I mean, of course, once China started not taking any of the plastic waste, a lot of it was is definitely going to Southeast Asia and a lot of South Asian country. But India has ratified to the Basel Convention, the new amendment that had come in 2019, under which the country cannot import any kind of plastic waste. So, of course, in a regulatory framework, this shouldn't happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Astha. Right, I'm from IIMC. Just right, you said that EPR has not been implemented very properly. So don't you think this is because the whole approach towards combating plastic waste it's a little biased? Like common man, vegetable seller, he's asked to use not the plastic thellas. We are asked to use no plastic straws. But the big corporate giants, they are using and producing huge tons of plastic. They are dumping it. So shouldn't there be more stringent laws to check plastic produced by them And of course, our role is also very, very important. But as they are big producers, so there should be a stringent check on them before.
Well, I'm very sure that CPCB is taking all the right action to ensure that. But I think as companies, presently, if you talk on the issue of packaging, across the globe, there is no alternative to, you know, the multi-layered packaging as of now. That is one big issue. So I think each of these industries and companies should also invest in R&D, and I'm assuming that is happening, to look at phasing out of packaging. But across the globe, this is a challenge. The idea why MLP was introduced was to ensure that your food stays for a longer period, it not gets contaminated, because most of the times packaging is inert in nature, it won't react with your food. But presently there's no viable alternative. No, you cannot use compostable plastic for, you know, probably an atta packaging or your chips packaging, because you have to ensure that its nutritional value and its quality needs to stay intact.
Yes.
So that is a huge challenge, but yes, companies should work on it, and need to work on it. There's no question
They can
about
be
it.
asked to pay some plastic tax, which can be used for recycling of such plastic.
Definitely, definitely.
Okay, P. Vinisha, let me get one final comment from you. Over the last few minutes, we've been talking about the alternatives, the best possible solutions that we can have to recycle and reuse plastic. What do you think are the other ways in which science and technology can be used towards achieving this cause?
Yeah, regarding alternate use, we have tried certain models, especially with women entrepreneurship. That is because alternates can easily be talked about, but unless it is available in mass scale, we cannot use it.
True.
Especially if you're talking about the bags, the carry bags. And what we did was waste from the textile industry was utilized to make bags, which is not, it's actually virgin cloth material from these textile industry. We got them in touch with the women from the destitute women and from NGOs, and they started earning certain income right at home. Now that has become entrepreneurship. We have about 150 women entrepreneurs in Bangalore who are doing this, and by doing this, the cost of each of these carry bags, that is with cloth, has come down. And this kind of entrepreneurship should be encouraged. Only then I think we can have alternatives. Then the second aspect of industries or the corporate giants to reduce plastic packaging, we have been working with also certain industries as to how we can cut down on certain plastics, especially looking at how it can be made more recyclable, and also looking at what is the resource efficiency and cost effectiveness of these packaging materials.
Okay.
I think this is the way forward.
Mr. Sharma, because she's mentioned the corporates and the, about the private sector, according to you, what are the best adoptive practices in the private sector in order to reduce and recycle the huge amount of plastic waste?
Yeah, see, if you see in what we have seen in plastic packaging, the size of the size as well as the weight of the packaging has been continuously reduced. And for example, earlier we used to have in plastic bottles, we used to have like say 25 grams, 30 grams bottles. Now it has come down to less than 20 grams.
Yes.
So this is the one step which the corporates have taken. And in addition to this, there is a lot of research and development is happening on ensuring that all the material which they are using as a packaging should be recyclable. In fact, most of the corporates have their internal goals also that by say 2022 or 2025, they will ensure like 100% of the packaging they will use that is a recyclable. So on these two steps, most of the industries are working, and everybody in industry knows that EPR is here and EPR is here to stay. So definitely they have to be, they have to ensure that whatever they are producing, they need to collect it back. So to ensure this, the important point is that the material should be recyclable.
Suriti, what he's suggesting can be done at an organizational level, but all of us know as individuals, we need to make a difference. I've been reiterating again and again that change begins from home, and this is where all of us have to step up and bring about that behavioral change that all of us here have been talking about. So before I wind up the program, share with us some tips on how you have successfully reduced dependency on plastic, about 5 to 10 quick pointers that can be beneficial to our audience and to our viewers at large.
So I feel that the most important step that one can take at a personal level is to compost, because that reduces 50% of the waste you produce, and otherwise that also degrades in the landfills. So it's not, because it is biodegradable, it doesn't mean that it biodegrades actually. Since it's in a landfill, it doesn't biodegrade normally. So you should compost. So for that, you can take any plastic bucket lying in your house, or a ghada preferably, and then you have to mix, you have to keep the ratio of carbon and nitrogen correctly. For example, the wet waste is your food waste, and the dry waste will be newspaper, cardboard, or dry leaves.
Okay.
So you have to put them on an 50-50 basis, and you mix it well, and then it automatically biodegrades.
Okay. Certainly, through a mix of motivation, creativity, technology and knowledge, as all of us have been talking about here through the course of 1 hour, we certainly can find concrete solutions to this most pressing environmental challenge before us. And for that, let us all begin with changes in our own behavior and reduce plastic use as much as we can, as all our panelists have suggested again and again. Thank you to all my guests for joining us on the program and sharing their thoughts with us. Thank you also to the audience members for participating and making it into a healthy discussion. In case you missed the television broadcast of our program, you can watch the episode online on YouTube. And don't forget to send your feedback and suggestions about our program. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you same time next week.